Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast show. And we're really happy to have with us today Jake Ross. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, Jake is a licensed therapist who spent a decade in Appalachia, burned out inside a digital health startup, became a dad twice over, and turned every bit of that chaos into a private practice built specifically for millennial men who are holding everything together on the outside while quietly falling apart on the inside. Jake, you said that most men don't need to be fixed. Where did that idea come from? And what were you watching happen to men around you that made you want to say that out loud?
Yeah, that's a great question. As with a lot of the things that brought me to this work, I would say part of that was my personal experience. Comparing myself to others, seeing friends, colleagues, peers, other men doing things that I felt were more masculine or more successful or whatever else it might be. And, that sent me into a really negative spiral for a lot of my life of feeling like I wasn't doing enough or I wasn't investing in the right priorities at the right time. It all kind of culminated when my daughter was born, back in 22, and, we went through the labor and delivery process, and she was here, and it was amazing, and then I was like, "Wait a second, I gotta figure out how to take care of all of this, and I gotta make sure that I'm still balancing all the other things," and I've got a couple of really good friends that I've been fortunate to have for 20 years, and I was reaching out to them in a text like, "Hey, guys, you've been dads for a minute, like, did it feel like this?" And they both said, "Oh, yeah, we just didn't loop you in because we didn't wanna scare you," right? And it's this idea of I think all of us men have these thoughts, these ideas, these concerns at one point or another. We're just afraid to say them out loud. We're afraid to admit to them. We're not willing to go seek out support and talk to the people that have been through it already. And everything gets a little easier when you do, when you know that you are not on an island alone dealing with this thing, but rather that everyone in your life has been through it in some shape or form and wants to support you to get to the other side as well.
So, hopefully, I'm not going to touch your nerve here, but you lost your grandfather to suicide when you were young. How's that loss played out in your reasoning behind this work?
Oh, yeah, so much. No nerve, thankfully, because I've done a lot of my own work to get that nerve to a place that it can be a little exposed. But it took me about 20 years. That burning out while in digital health startup was kind of the culmination of figuring it all out. And, I went through a really rough experience during that time. I lost my grandfather to suicide at 7. It was a difficult experience for everyone in my family. We didn't really have the words to talk about it in the way that I hope I will talk about it if I have to ever experience that with my kiddos. But I found myself missing him so immensely. I've always had really intense emotions. I had a really close relationship with him because he'd pick me up from preschool during those years prior to losing him. And, all culminated when I was 27 and I found myself in an inpatient psych unit against my will because I was having some suicidal ideation and realized that I'd been carrying this with me for 20 years. I hadn't been able to talk about it like this without getting verklempt, not being able to get the words out, just feeling that overwhelming rise of emotions. So now I realize that he's a big part of the reason that I do this work. That everything I do is a little bit in his honor and homage to him. And yeah, I think it drives me. It also makes me realize he was a strong man. He was an Appalachian man, and I think had a lot of amazing protective factors that still didn't protect him at the end of the day. And I want to make sure that future generations don't have that same struggle.
So, a guy's killing it at work. His relationship looks fine from the outside. Why is he still waking up in the middle of the night with a tight chest?
So many potential reasons. I think a lot of it is really knowing yourself. I feel like I know more about myself now than I ever have, and it's so empowering. And I still think there's a ton to learn. And the more that we know about ourselves, the more we know our patterns, the more that things start to make sense. I think it's also about prioritizing things that align with our values, knowing that the things that are important to me personally are being a dad, showing up to work with the folks that I work with, and trying to make men's mental wellness a little bit easier everywhere. So, as long as I'm doing things that are contributing to those things every day, I feel like I'm on the right path. In the past, I always had back to that comparison, right? I'm imagining that I need to be in this place that this person is, and it doesn't feel like I'm doing enough to get there. But wait, if I get there, does that align with my values? If I have to do X, Y, and Z in order to get to that place? Am I going to be able to put my head on the pillow at night and sleep easy? And I think when you can answer those questions confidently, it's this self leadership. It's this inner self that I know I can look in the mirror and determine whether or not what I'm doing in that moment aligns with what I think I should be doing.
So tell me a little bit about your practice, what your typical would you call them a client or would you call them a patient?
I call them clients. I don't like the patient word. I think it's just too clinical. I really don't love clients, but I got to use some word that's common vernacular. So yeah, I go
Well,
client.
unless we come up with another something in our lexicon, I guess those are the two that I think of
Yeah,
that we
same.
need to make something up.
Right? Yeah, we can coin it. We can get rich. It'd be great.
An elephant. No, that's all you're taking. So tell me about your typical client and what you try to accomplish, for that person that's coming in seeking some kind of help. What are they generally facing?
Yeah, so my client is normally the millennial man. He's a new dad, he's a new husband, he's got a high pressure work environment, and he's trying to keep all the roles balanced, feeling like he can't really show up as his true self anywhere. And, initially, I really focus on symptom reduction. What's going on that's really causing you to struggle to get through the day? What's keeping you up at night? All those good things. Try to get some skills, some interventions going that make the day to day a little bit easier. And then once we get there, I like to kind of start peeling the onion back, right? Figuring out what are the stories that you've been telling yourself about who you are, how you show up, your life experiences that are impacting some of these symptoms, some of these triggers that make these symptoms harder, that make it harder to get through the day. And it's kind of a four-phase system. I call it the internal operating system for men. But what we're really doing is we're looking at all of our stories, all of our relationships, all of our experiences, figuring out what impact they've had on us, how they shape us. We go back and we desensitize the things that we need to. We can drop the stuff that's in our backpack that we don't want to carry anymore. And at the end of it, you're coming out with this new set of tools, with this new understanding of all that you've been through to get you to this point. And again, I think that's that self leadership that's so empowering. Now, when I hit a hard moment, I can look at myself and know, why is this difficult? Oh, because I'm trying to achieve that thing that's really important to me. I'm going to keep going versus why is this difficult? Because I'm comparing myself to the Joneses and I want to have a Tesla. I don't want to do this anymore.
So how do you so the natural tendency of I don't want to be sexist because I think it crosses the sexist line, but the natural tendency is to keep up with the Joneses. I mean, this is not anything new. I'm
Right.
sure that it was going on back in the time of Shakespeare.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
how do you combat that and allow yourself to not get um, trapped into that? And so much of our, especially in the American culture, so much of our culture is around, are you keeping up with the Joneses?
Right. Yeah, it's ironic. One of the benefits of being a therapist is that I just end up getting this whole new view on a lot of things. I say that because I'll have some guys who come in to work with me and they're struggling with, I want to be able to go out to that social event without someone with me and feel confident walking in. And I'm like, oh man, that sounds amazing. I wish I could feel like that. Tell me about what makes you think that's possible. And then I look at these guys and I think, if I walked into that place by myself and I saw you, I'd think that you were doing great and not thinking about this. But meanwhile, in my head, I'm thinking about it. Wait a second. Are we all thinking about it a little bit? I think when you start to get to that point, it's okay, I see the Joneses over here and it looks like they've got the perfect life. They've got the fancy cars, they've got the big house, everyone's smiling, but wait a second. What do people think is going on with me when they look at me from the outside? When I was in that stage of burnout, I think you could have gone to anybody and asked how I was doing, and they would have said, he's killing it. He's doing so great. He seems so happy, all the things. Because I had to make sure that nobody asked me how I was really doing. I had to put up a real good mask there. So I think it's that perspective shift plus the empathy of just really looking and saying, that's what they're showing. I think about it like social media a lot. Little Instagram lives that we see of people that are this much of their 24-hour day, the only the good parts, right? So if you think of it like that, then what really am I comparing myself to? Am I comparing myself to a realistic expectation that I want, or am I comparing myself to some idyllic mirage that is not the reality? And I couldn't get there if I wanted to because no one can.
So you're so right about social media, and that actually exacerbates the issue. So how do you get somebody to, or how do you help somebody to come to grips with where they are is okay? It's great. It's not just okay, but it's great. How do you get them to that stage? Are there certain things that you do or methodologies that you'll employ that can help in that process?
Yeah, one of my favorite exercises to do with guys, especially early on, is what I call the ideal me exercise. And it's, go spend an hour and sit down with a cup of coffee or a Coke or whatever you want and really think about how do you want to show up? How do you want other people to talk about what you bring to a room, what you bring to relationships, what you bring to settings? How do you want your kids or your loved ones to talk about you after you're gone? All of those things. And I think when you actually go and take the effort to do that exercise, I've never had someone come in and say, I hope everybody says that I had the fanciest, fastest car in the neighborhood, right? It's all things that are completely outside of material possessions, out of anything that the Joneses are trying to push on us. And then, back to being rooted in value driven behavior. I hope that my kids know that they were always my number one priority in my life. And sometimes when I'm hopping on a plane to go talk about men's mental health somewhere and I don't get to hang out with them, it feels like, well, are they really going to know that? Well, yeah, they are because I show it in different places, right? But if you challenge yourself with those questions every time, then again, I start to feel empowered and confident. And it's not an overnight thing. I think that's the biggest difference. I've been doing my own mental health journey for going on 10 years now, and I still have a million things that I have locked up in the closet that I've not gotten to yet, right? But I also have taken a lot of gigantic strides, and I've noticed what it's like to feel this way, to live this way, to show up this way. And oh, it's way better than the alternative.
So when you have there's when you have you know many people in the millennial age group, or most of them are married and they have spouses, and so this idea of keeping up with the Joneses and the pressures involved with that extend to the spouse, and sometimes the man might be okay with where they are in life and be happy with it, but the spouse is not, and that affects the way that they feel about themselves. How do you work through that kind of an issue? I mean, that's super common.
Yes, yes, it is, and it's why I don't work with couples. No, I'm just teasing. I do think, it's the grander scheme of I don't know about listeners or about you and your experience, but I think, getting into relationships, getting into marriage, there wasn't a playbook for me. There wasn't here's all the things that you should make sure you're talking about before you make this commitment. And, I think finances is a big one. Of course, kids and parenting is a big one as well. But my easy answer is communication, right? I think the biggest problem that we as men have is that we feel like if we communicate a feeling, it makes us weak. That if we really say what's going on, that we're going to end up in more conflict than if we beat it down and avoid it. So sit down and have that conversation, right? If you're feeling like you are financially strapped because you keep trying to keep up appearances and your spouse continues to spend on the appearances, I think we have to sit down and come to the table of what is your relationship with money? What are you getting out of making these purchases? Is there other ways that we can scratch that itch or check that box? Because I'm worried about X, Y, or Z, right? I'm always worried about, I don't want to be working when I'm 75 years old. I don't think I'm ever going to stop working, but I don't want to feel like I have to be doing 12, 14-hour days when I'm 75 to make sure that the ends are being met. And I think that's the delayed gratification of we have to sacrifice the shiny thing now to make sure that we have a more peaceful existence later on.
So what's the difference between regular life stress and the kind of stress that's actually doing damage?
That is a fascinating line. I think lots of people come to me and say, I just don't want to have any stress anymore. And I think that's impossible, right? If you really imagine what a stress-free existence is, if I never have any stress on my body that says that I need to go eat or breathe or blink, if I never have any motivation to go do anything, right? Like a stress-free existence is not fun, but there is good stress versus bad stress. And I think of good stress like the things that come in that make you think, oh, I got to get up. I got to go do that thing. I got to get the kids to school. I got to make sure I'm ready for that presentation, whatever else it might be. Versus bad stress is the one that you can't really turn off, right? When I'm stressed about getting my kids to daycare in the morning, once I get them to school, I've dropped them off in their rooms and, I've had a little bit of a minor heartbreak because I hate leaving them anywhere for any period of time. That stress of dropping them off has gone away. Versus in my past, when I was burning the candle at every end, I would wake up stressed. I would go to sleep stressed. I would be stressed about the presentation. I would give it, and then I would be stressing about how it went, and I would never get away from it. So I really think it's more about your relationship with stress. It is a necessity of life. We have to know what it looks like, how it feels, and have the tools to deal with it. But you're never going to get away from it entirely because if you do, it's just a whole nother problem to have.
So, I wake up sometimes at night and I'm thinking about something and it's just going through my mind over and over and over. And I'm sure this is not at all uncommon. Is there any tricks or tips that you have for somebody that's creating those kinds of stressors themselves in their own mind to kind of break that cycle? Because I know it ends up being it's a cycle. It's something that your mind is just gets stuck on this idea and it's going over um, all the scenarios, and then you lock onto one. You think, well, what if this happens or what if that happens, and then your mind gets trapped in this. So how do you break that kind of a cycle?
Yeah, there's, a couple of ways, and I think it's so common. I joke around about sleep. Like, we especially as men do so well of beating back the things that we don't want to think about, don't want to worry about throughout the day, and then we go to sleep and our brain's like, "Hey, look, you're not in control anymore. Let me start throwing this stuff at you," right? So, I love to journal personally. I think that it can be good to sit down right before you go to bed and write in your journal about everything that's going through your head, everything that's happening, whatever else. But I'll tell you what has actually really worked well for me that's not that pre-bedtime journaling is I keep a little notebook and a pen in my bedside table. And when I have that like 2 a.m., I shoot up and I'm thinking about the thing tomorrow or next week, I pull that paper and pen out, I write it down, and I don't know if my brain was always like this or I've trained it to be like this, but once I write something down on a piece of paper, I'm not worrying about it because I know where that piece of paper is. I know that I can come back. That probably 9 out of 10 times I can fall right back asleep and I wake up the next morning and I pull out the piece of paper to try to remember. And I've written in such chicken scratch, I don't even know what I was thinking about, right? It must have not been that important. But I think giving yourself that permission of, okay, I'm going to jot it down here and it's safe, lets you to really drift off and go back to sleep. I'll also say though, anytime that I'm struggling with sleep, if you wake up at 2 a.m., you shoot up in the bed, you try to write that thing down on your brain dump, and you lay back down and you're still having trouble sleeping, I don't think there's any benefit to laying there and saying, go to sleep, go to sleep. Let me look at the clock and I know what time my alarm's going to go off. And if I fall asleep right now, I'll get 3 hours and 27 minutes, right? Just get up, go do something else. And maybe you have a really rough night of no rest and the next day is hard. But sometimes I'll find I pick up a book and go sit on the couch and, my alarm goes off and I've nodded off on the couch because I took that pressure of I have to fall back asleep off.
I do the book thing too, so I actually like it.
Yeah,
So
it's
when a
like the
man
one thing that
says,
really calms me.
yeah, so when a man says he's fine, somebody says, "Well, how is everything?" Or "How you doing?" "I'm fine." What's he usually actually saying?
Oh, I think it could be a few things. I think it's often I don't want to acknowledge how I'm really feeling, so I'm going to say fine. I think sometimes it's I don't want this person to press on me, so I'm going to give them a neutral. Depending on who's asking, I think we're worried that we're going to bring down the mood, that we're going to dampen whatever. If I get home and the kids are running around and the wife asks how I'm doing and I say I'm extremely stressed and irritable. Please make sure that you don't do anything to frustrate me. Like we're gonna have a pretty rough night there, right? So it seems easier to say fine. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think the biggest is I did it different, but I ran around for a while making sure that everybody else was talking to me about what was going on with them so that I didn't have to talk about myself. And I think that's another way that we do it. We say fine. And if the person that's asking us is doing really well, they tell us that and we can ask questions. If they say that they're doing really poorly, they tell us that and we can ask questions. And oh, look, I had the spotlight on me for 1 second, but I threw up my fine sign and now it's off.
So what do you think is the number one reason that keeps a guy from picking up the phone and booking a session, even when he knows that he's having, issues?
I think it is thinking something's wrong if you do. I think that our mental health system has been designed in such a way that people think, I don't need to really think about it or work on it unless it's broken. And I don't know why we've gotten there when, physical health, I think we do so much better at preventative and maintenance. Still a lot of ground to improve, right? But that's why I sit so much with mental wellness rather than talking about mental health. I don't want you to call me when the wheels have fallen off and you need help putting it back together. I want you to call me when you get the low air light on the first tire, and let's figure out what's going on so that you avoid that spot entirely. I had my very traumatic and difficult experience of being locked in a inpatient psych ward unit without wanting to be there, and I don't wish that on anyone. Unfortunately, I do have to facilitate that from time to time in my practice, but I don't let yourself get there, right? The only reason I got there was because I wasn't talking about it prior to, and if I could go back and start talking about it 30 years ago, I would have definitely done that.
So a lot of men try therapy once, doesn't click. They say, no, this therapy stuff is junk. It doesn't work. So what usually goes wrong in that first attempt, or is it just a situational thing?
So I think another unique part of therapy is the number one indicator of successful outcomes in therapy is how well you mesh with your therapist. And I don't know why it's like the one profession that we just think, I find the therapist who's in network with my insurance and nearby and they have availability, so that's my therapist. Like we're all very different. We're all people. We all have different educations and experiences. We all have different certifications and approaches. And I've seen 4 or 5 therapists throughout my life and really connected with 2. So, I'm only at a 500 batting average, and I kinda know what I'm looking for when I go into it. So, first and foremost, I would say, don't be afraid to shop around. Don't be afraid to say, "I just don't think I'm really meshing well with you. I'm gonna try someone else." But also, if I had the silver bullet and I had all of the answers sitting under this desk, I wouldn't be doing this work because I would just be selling that for a lot more money and a lot less time, right? It's a process. You're not going to come in here and leave tomorrow and wake up and everything's going to be better. And I really am big on focusing on baby steps, focusing on progress. It's a quality improvement process, right? All of life is, but I think being in therapy is really about looking at all of the things that are happening in your life and being okay with moving them all just a little incremental step over time. Because we're not going to go from night to day, but we can get there over time and then really appreciate the journey even more.
So so this is a statistic I've written down here, but you can maybe validate it or not. Men make up half the population and nearly 80% of the suicides.
Mm.
Is that accurate? And what's the gap between those two numbers? What's that telling us?
Oh,
Is
it
that accurate first? The 80%?
it is from the latest data I've seen. I think I saw like 78.6 last time I was looking. But yeah, it's way higher. I think the biggest likelihood in the data is the access to means. I think men are more common to own a firearm, to have access to some kind of lethal means. But really, I think the other part is this thing, right? This men's mental health problem, men's mental wellness problem, where we don't talk. I am meeting with female therapists pretty often, and I joke around about. I'm not gonna take any of your business. I don't wanna see any ladies. I'm really focused on seeing the guys, and, they joke around about the same thing, but I think commonly women have a little social unit, a little, support circle versus, I have guys in my support circle that don't use me for support even though I use them for support, right? So, we say fine, we hide it, we don't talk about it, and I guess some might say that we're prone to finding an easier way. I would never call making that action in the moment an easy way out, but I do think we don't like to sit in discomfort. So when it gets to that point, if we're that uncomfortable and we know that there's one way to make us not feel uncomfortable anymore, it seems like a realistic option.
Yeah, I can see it. So here, I'll do a couple rapid fire just to break things up. Golf or fishing, which one is actually therapy for you?
Golf.
So, Harvey Pinnock said the reason why they called it golf is because all the other four-letter words were taken.
Yes, I totally agree.
Uh,
And I think that's why it's so therapeutic for me. It was the first place that I could stay emotionally regulated before I knew what emotional regulation was. I am not good at golf. I am hitting the ball all over the place, into the woods, anything else, but I'm outside, the sun's shining on me. I'm usually with some friends or with myself and or meeting some new people, and I put my phone away. I run a whole business from my phone and computer. So it's the one place, especially now, that I truly disconnect entirely and focus on the 9 or 18 holes ahead of me.
so, the one word your wife Brittany would use to describe you at your worst.
Mm, probably narcissistic.
So, the one thing millennial men are better at than their fathers when it comes to emotions.
I think talking about them.
Yeah, I'd probably agree to that. Um, something you tell clients that you still have to remind yourself of.
Everything I tell clients, I still have to remind myself of. I think the big one would be who whose expectations are those? I call it shitting on ourselves, and I think, ugh, I should have woke up at my first alarm this morning. Like, says who? Who is doing the report card of how I did my morning routine? It's just me, and I already missed it. Why am I making myself feel guilty about it? Let's make up for it later.
So, a guy books his first session. Walk me through exactly what happens from the moment he shows up.
Yeah, so it all starts before that with the consult call. I'm really big on the consult call figuring out fit. So folks find me on the internet, they schedule a consult call, we hop on the phone for 20 or 30 minutes and we just ask each other a few questions. I want to make sure that they get their questions answered. I want to make sure I'm understanding what's going on with them. Then that first session they come in, I joke, it's like an interrogation and it's very unlike all the sessions that happen after. I am trying to understand everything that brought you to therapy, get to know you the best that I can, and put together what I call our individual care plan, which I view as like our playbook for therapy. It's where are you right now? Where do you want to be? And how are we going to get there? And it's individualized to the client that's sitting in the room with me. And I bring that back to our second session. We look it over and then we jump in and start doing the work. Sometimes the work looks like, hey, we've got this on your care plan. Let's work on this today. Sometimes it looks like, somebody walks in and they had a big fight with spouse the night before, or they've got a big work project that they're stressing over. And I like to let my guys really lead what we're talking about because obviously it's their time, they're paying me, but I don't just let you talk about the thing. I'm also going to challenge you a little bit, make sure that we're getting a new learning, that we're peeling that onion back another layer. And that's how the subsequent sessions look. Every 3 months or so, we pull that playbook back out and say, where are we? Do we have this play mastered? Do we want to add new plays? And of course, we can change the frequency of our appointments at that point if it seems like it's the right time.
So, insurance has gotten a lot better over the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, on looking at mental health issues. And so, how do you handle that? In network, out of network. How does all that work, and how does it affect your business, the business side of it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I agree that insurance has gotten better. I also think it's still horrible, and that's why I no longer take it. I am full on private pay for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, just the exhaustion of dealing with the insurance system for as many years as I did. But I've also found that as I've moved into this private pay sector, folks are into it. They're into knowing that they're getting a premium service. They're into knowing that it's completely confidential. It breeds back into what I talk about with the mental wellness aspect. When I'm booking or when I'm billing your insurance, I have to find a way to give you a diagnosis that I can then prove medical necessity for, when I'm doing private pay, I can say we're working on this thing and we have this agreement and we know we're working on it together. So, of course, I'm still using the DSM, I'm still assessing for diagnostics, everything else, but I don't have to tag a diagnosis on to the first session to make sure that your insurance approves it. And I just think that makes for such a better experience as a client in the room. It does impact my business in a lot of ways. I mean, I can work with less guys in what I think is a more quality manner and still have the same income, which is great. My little social work heart hates that I can't support folks that can't afford me. I've got some
Mhm.
plans to work on that on the sides that I can get out of that place. But it's part of why I'm going into the group practice and really focused on bringing on additional clinicians to be able to serve men across the lifespan and also have a larger range of cost for different level therapists with different experience and different specialties.
So tell me about the group plans. How does that
Yeah.
work? How do you do that?
Yeah, so it's called the Ross Wellness Group, and it always has been, but it's just been me for the last 5 years. So I'm thinking about making it into an actual group practice. What that'll look like is bringing on clinicians who have different niches, different specialties, different populations they really love to work with. Training them up in how I do therapy in the internal operating system for men, while also wanting them to bring how they do therapy, whatever they've found to work, because I don't want to just be a one size fits all, because it doesn't. And what I would really like to do over time is get to a place that we are the premier men's mental health provider for all men and boys from birth to death throughout the Appalachian region. So, in all 13 of the Appalachian states, we will be licensed and able to provide services. I'm very passionate about Appalachia from my decade there, getting my bachelor's and master's, and also my papa that we were discussing was born in Appalachia and is very much an Appalachian man. So, yeah, that's my strong connection to the region and wanting to make sure that I'm giving back to it throughout my life.
So I know all about Ohio, but I don't know where Delaware, Ohio is. I don't. I just. It must be in the South.
It's actually right outside Columbus. It's just like maybe
Okay. Yeah.
15, 20 miles north.
Yeah. I know about Northeast Ohio. So, um, my wife is from there. So, um, talking about group, yeah, did you do any like group sessions, like a group of men together? And because it seems like, Alcoholics Anonymous has been so successful over, I don't know, 100 years. And that's all they do is group. But I wondered, how this would work, men admitting to weaknesses in a group might sometimes be kind of challenging.
Yeah, I have not done that yet. It is on my radar. I'll tell you, even more than specific group therapy, I'm really intrigued by the idea of creating spaces where men can go to connect with each other to build those social outlets. I have something that I call the Millennial Men's Playbook. It's like 10 plays, traits that we can have that make life a little bit easier. And the first one is our trusted tribe. And, I'm very fortunate that I have an expansive trusted tribe that has been here to support me at all different seasons and changes of life. But I think it's really easy to get into a place as a man where we don't have those connections, where the folks that are around us are relying on us. I make the joke about I think men come and see me because I'm a man and I see a female therapist, and I think there's a part of my caveman brain that's like, you can't go tell another male therapist that you struggle with your own mental health stuff. What if he tries to steal your business? What if he tries to take your family? It's totally irrational, but it's still there. And I talk about how it shouldn't be there all day. So I love the idea of a third space that's not your home, that's not your work, that you can go. And it doesn't have to be sit down and tell us how depressed and anxious you are. It can be sit down and let's talk about the sports game that's on TV, but also if you're depressed or anxious and you need someone to talk about with it, we're here for you. So I see that being a thing. I also have been trying to do some fun kind of engagement events and just building awareness. There's this like brews and braids where we do like a little bit of beer and we get a hairstylist and we all who are fathers of daughters can learn how to braid our girls' hairs better. I've seen it on Instagram. I have not put this together yet, but it's on my short list for things to do in the near future.
So I see that a lot of men don't have friends. I mean, they have acquaintances, but
Yeah.
they don't really. I mean, it's really common for a man not to have any friends, not like real friends, but maybe in some social. How do you help someone with that kind of a situation?
It's so hard. It comes back to those guys we were just talking about a minute ago that are, I don't want to walk into the new situation and start talking to somebody to try to build that relationship. And for most of my life, and sometimes in my life currently, I still feel that way. I like to find the things that I'm passionate about. Back to golf and fishing. There are so many times that I have tried to go get in a quick round of golf and I've been paired with a couple strangers and end up hitting it off and we exchange phone numbers and I've played golf rounds with them later, right? And that was all happenstance, but I feel great about talking about things that I'm passionate about. You put me in a room full of therapists and we want to talk about men's mental health, like I'll make 50 friends. Tell me to go out and talk about the Cavaliers winning in 7 games, like I might make one or two. I watched it, but I don't feel as confident about that. So I think it helps to figure out what is a guy's interests. And sometimes that's just like, go try 5 new things between now and next time and see what happens. I also recommend that Meetup website a lot. I'm not sponsored by them, but I know there's a decent amount of activities where you're walking into, let's say, a trail hike. I'm going to walk into that and know that everyone's that's there is interested in hiking trails. So I can talk to them about that and maybe I find a friend. At the end of the day, I think we're all always willing to add another good friend and, go take the risk and see what happens. I don't think you're going to be shoved off.
So if someone is listening today and they're a millennial man, or maybe even a little older or a little younger, and they're facing some of these issues, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So you can find me on my website, www.wellnessgroup.org. I'm on Instagram where I post like an Instagram therapist at the Ross Wellness Group. I'm also on LinkedIn where I post like a millennial dad who cares about men's mental health. And I'm Jake Ross on there. There's quite a few Jake Rosses. I'm building a LinkedIn group of guys named Jake Ross, but I have glasses on and a blue collared shirt and would love for you all to come follow me there. Feel free to engage with the
And you're
content
taller
anywhere.
than all the other Jake Rosses.
Not in that picture because I didn't learn that lesson yet.
Sorry, the audience will just have to guess what we're talking about, and we'll leave it as a mystery. So actually, you can message Jake on LinkedIn and ask him what we were talking about at the end of this podcast.
Yes, that's perfect.
So Jake, thanks a lot for coming on. I really enjoyed it.
No problem. Thank you for having me. This is awesome.